Hey guys, Rob Avis here. Today I'm going to be talking about a book that I'm reading called Debt. And in this video, I'm going to share some of my insights as a result of reading this book. Let's get into it. So the book's called Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And I was really drawn to this book because I have been debt-free for about 99.9% of my life. I think I had one debt on my car, which was $3,000. It was a 1990 Honda Accord, and it took me a few months to pay that off. And I might have missed a couple of credit card payments that were really painful in university, and that took me a while to pay off as well, which then never happened again. And since then, my life mission has always been to have at least 2 years of savings in cash, not including investments, just to remain secure, essentially. I don't like the idea of living paycheck to paycheck. I don't like the feeling that it gives me, and so that's just been a quality of life thing for me, to know that I can basically screw up for 2 years straight and not worry about the repercussions. Obviously, you would worry about the repercussions if something did happen, but it also allows you to self-insure by knowing that if somebody in your family gets sick, that you've got a bit of resource to back you up, essentially, which is largely different than most people who are living paycheck to paycheck and deeply indebted. And it's funny in our culture how different debts carry different meanings. So mortgages, for example, are considered good debt because in theory houses should always appreciate. And if you actually do a little bit of history, digging into the history of real estate, it's actually not true that real estate always appreciates. And the appreciation is typically goes in fits and spurts, so very large amounts of appreciation followed by long periods of time with no appreciation or even depreciation. And so while we all need a place to live, the realty industry has done a really good job of making that into the ultimate investment vehicle. And I'm not denying that there is some investment potential there, and people that understand the real estate game can do very well at it, but it's just not this ubiquitous, universal thing that you can do to end your life with a whole pile of money. And at best, or I guess maybe I should say at worst, buying a house and having a mortgage is just a forced savings plan. And so you're using the need for shelter in order to put money away. So coming back to this book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years, what's really interesting about it, because I've had this aversion to debt my whole life, is understanding how we got here, basically. And so money is this universal fiction that we've created as a species to essentially make transactions easier amongst people. And originally, as a species, a long time ago, we had tons of different ways of exchanging value, tally sticks and different coins, and likely even barter systems that weren't even written down anywhere, so we don't even have any historic context for it. And as states wanted to increase dominance over their region, they started paying their militaries in bullion and forcing the payment of state-based taxes in that same currency, which basically forced people into the military in order to get cash, or it forced people to create businesses around supporting the military so that they could be paid in silver, so that they could pay their taxes. And basically through this multi-generational or even multi-millennia, basically over hundreds or thousands of years, the people at the center who were issuing the currency recognized that if they could own the system of exchange, the system that basically allowed people to find an efficient way to exchange value through taxation, through militarization, that they could basically own all human energy within that state. And that, whether or not that was an implicit goal on the front end, I actually believe that it wasn't. I think it was just this thing that started to emerge. People started realizing that they could essentially game the system as a result of controlling the currency. And so that was probably my largest insight as a result of reading this book, and really got me thinking again about the importance of community groups and making sure that as a bunch of individuals in a community that we're coming up with novel and unique and decentralized ways of exchanging human energy, and that it's not easy. We all want to be able to have Canadian or American or euros, dollars basically, or state currencies to pay our mortgages, to pay our taxes. And so going that extra step to trade outside of that monoculture currency-based system is challenging. But the reality is that if we don't have parallel systems like that, then all of our value, all of our life energy, which is ultimately just hours of the day, the average human lives 600,000 hours, is always just going to be based on your ability to trade one of your life hours of energy for the next state-based currency. And I think the thing that really captures the essence of this the most is the concept of the mortgage. And so mortgage is a French word for death pledge. So mort is death and gage is pledge. And it's funny because if you go to Quebec, which is the French part of Canada, they don't have banks that sell mortgages or offer mortgages. They offer hypothèques, because I don't think too many people would sign death pledges. But because we don't really understand the root of that word here in the Anglo-Saxon portion of Canada, that's the word that we use. And the funny thing is that when you have an organization like a bank that will allow you to get access to 30 years of life energy today in order to pay for a house, so basically if you turn that around, it takes you 30 years just to pay for shelter in our country. That's ridiculous. Like, that's unbelievable that we have to spend that much of our life energy paying for the ability to stay warm and sheltered. But what it does is it inflates everything. So all of a sudden now you're paying 30 years of life energy in order to buy a house, which means you've got this huge amount of cash, which means that everybody can slowly start to charge more, to the point where we have these ridiculous mortgages. And it's basically just a form of slavery, which is really the final insight of the book, is that when you don't control the mechanism of trade, you don't control your life. And the only way that you can regain that life energy back, there's only really two ways, is to be one of the people that are able to accumulate massive amounts of wealth and therefore can hire people to work for you, or to grow your own food, find alternative ways of exchanging value with people within your community, and generally stay out of debt. And that's really this is a whole series of videos that I'm gonna have to make about this whole concept. So I think it's really interesting to understand how we get to these places. History is such a valuable teacher and gives us insights with regards to where we've been, how we got here, and where we might go. And so I guess in the end, I highly recommend this book. It's a complex book. I think if you're going to read it, expect to have to read it a couple of times to understand all the concepts and mechanisms that he talks about. he does a great job of juxtaposing kind of Western culture versus Eastern culture versus indigenous culture, and how all these different cultures essentially figured out ways to attribute value and exchange with one another, which is ultimately, I think, to be human. So if you're interested in that book, I personally listen to it on Audible. I listen to all my books on Audible, but I'll put a link to it in the show notes below. I'd love your comments on debt and any resources that you've come across on YouTube or other areas that talk about this in further detail. And we'll make additional videos in the future about this, because it's a topic that I spend a lot of time thinking about, especially now that I've got little kids and they're going to be subject to this type of system as they get older as well. So thanks so much, guys. We'll wrap this video up here, and as always, if you found it useful, give me a like. It sends me feedback that you got some value out of it. Leave comments below and share with your friends. Okay, see you in the next video, guys.